Well, hello, everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. Another day of a lifetime of Hallmark. I am Les Kirkendall-Barrett. Hello, Jason Bowers.
Hello, Les Kirkendall-Barrett.
And hello, Kurt Fitzpatrick.
Hello, Les Kirkendall-Barrett, and hello, Jason Bowers.
We take movies from both Lifetime and the Hallmark Channel and try to make sense of them.
We're not very successful, though, because they don't often make sense, but they are fun to watch.
And we go down all kinds of rabbit holes. We talk about Angelian quite a bit. We talk about the show Enos.
June Squibb. We are team June Squibb all the way.
And we have Black China news every single episode.
So with that in mind, why don't you listen to a lifetime of Hallmark? You can listen wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Well, hello everybody. This is Les, and I love soaps. And I'm back. I had a lot going on. I adopted a kid, I was in a show, I had some other things going on, so I basically took the summer off. But I'm back, everybody, and I'm here to talk about our favorite soaps, both in the US and the UK. So I am starting the second week of September, so fasten your seatbelts because we've got a lot of soap-tastic stuff to talk about. So remember, this is Les, and I love soaps, and you can find me anywhere that you can get podcasts. See ya! Well, hello, everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. It is time for another episode of the Reality Reading Rainbow, where we talk about books and try to make sense of them. I am Les Kirkendall-Barrett, and I also would like to introduce my co-host, Victoria Wood. Hello, Victoria.
Hello, everyone. Hi, Les. I'm super excited to be here to talk about our new book.
Yes, we are talking about Dorinda. I was saying that actually. We're talking about Dorinda's book, Make It Nice. And before we get into it, we've got a couple of other things to talk about first, but I'm just going to start off with this. I was pleasantly surprised.
Well, you guys, we're talking about the first 3 chapters in her book. We're going to get into it soon, but I was blown away. The writing alone, I think it was beautiful. It kept you turning the page. I'm like, you go, Dorinda. She's really weaving a story here. And yeah, first impressions is I'm shocked. It's good.
And I'm reading this book feeling like I'm getting to know her, which is what you're supposed to do in your book, Erica Jane. We're supposed to read your book, Erica Jane, and feel like we're getting to know you and know things about you. And they don't have to be salacious things, just things. And you know, from what we've read so far, I'm kind of learning, okay, so this is how Dorinda ticks, which is what you want to get from a book like this, is how the person ticks, you know?
Absolutely. I mean, it gives you insight into who she is as a woman. I mean, I found myself kind of pre-hyping the podcast, saying how excited I was in Clubhouse, but also just saying at the same time, I was debating, do I rewatch episodes with Dorinda when she first came on the show, or do I go in with a blank slate? And to be fair, life got in the way, and I was like, okay, it's forcing me to go in blank slate. Had no time to watch any episodes. So I'm going off memory, and I feel I'm getting to know Dorinda as a person, which I think is very important, because when we see these women on screen, we're getting them, on screen. It's a snapshot in time and their life. But I want to know what's going on with them. I want to know what makes them tick. I want to know what motivates them. I want to know about their background, because the truth is we all watch the same show. However, we watch it through our own lens. So our experiences come out. So I'm wanting to know Dorinda's experiences, and I can say, first 3 chapters, which is like the first 50, 60 pages, she is delivering. And again, the fact that it reads beautifully helps, but also I really feel I'm getting to know her. I'm getting to know her family. I'm knowing her background. I'm knowing who she was as baby Dorinda, young Dorinda, high school Dorinda, young adult Dorinda. So yeah, I'm seeing these different facets of her, and I'm fascinated.
And I love the fact that she called herself out on her drinking. She called herself out.
Again, I think Dorinda really is dishing with this book. Erica Jane, take notes, okay? Because
Erica.
I'm gonna be real. Whatever book Erica writes next, I'm gonna snatch that off the bookshelf and I want to read it. Yes. However, I highly recommend you get a new ghostwriter. I'm sorry. But also dish, like really tell us your story. This is it. There's no need to gloss. Take a leaf out of Dorinda's book before you write your book. Buy Dorinda's book and read it.
And you know what? I remember before saying that, how do I put it? Talking about the ghostwriter of Erica's book. And I remember before saying, well, you can only use what they give you.
True.
But I've kind of changed my thought on that, because as a ghostwriter, isn't it your job to get stuff out of them?
Well, you're supposed to definitely help. And even if they just give you what they give you, right, you're also supposed to craft it, organize it. Because I can give you bits and pieces of my life. I'll call you or email you and, I just remembered this when I was 5. Uh-huh. And then, I remember this when I was 12. I remember this when I was 7. I don't have to deliver it in order. Right. You think up your ideas. You share your stories. You verify with others if they're available. It's always good to, kind of get a secondary source to verify some stories, especially when they involve other people. But then it's the ghostwriter's job as well to organize it, to structure it in a way where it flows. And that's where I feel Dorinda, again, just started reading. We're not through, and I'm trying to read slow so I can give you my live reactions. But so far, Dorinda's book, it flows.
Oh yeah,
I'm getting chronology. I'm getting vibe. I'm getting, So that's the job. I feel with Erica's book. Not only did I get no substance, but I wasn't interested. It never kept me turning. It didn't grab me. There was no hook. Dorinda has a hook, and she's doing it very well.
The only thing that Erica's book is going to be good for is being used as evidence to implicate her in court.
Okay, that's some shade I'm happy to throw too, because all this woman's talking about is how expensive it is to be her. And it's so funny because now we're talking, I think said ghostwriter was or made a statement or an article in defense of saying, she really didn't know anything based on, I guess, the information he received to write the book. But that's a whole different story.
Said ghostwriter who has been on this podcast.
True.
So,
true.
But before we start, speaking of, Dorinda and the Real Housewives of New York, let's talk about it. As the housewives all say, there's an elephant in the room.
And that elephant is huge, and that elephant is stinky. It needs a shower. It needs to be aired out. I am so I was going to say disappointed, but I take that back. I remember when the announcement was made, and I got the announcement first from Club Bravo's Instagram, courtesy of Dave Quinn. We talked about it in the Club Bravo room. Oh, we have a date. It's September 23rd. The reunion's happening. Right. And I remember saying, I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it, because everything, and again, I know it's the most used word since COVID, but everything about this season has been unprecedented, right? From the way they taped it, recorded, did their edits, even down to the addition of a new housewife, a new friend, the fact that the season ended with no reunion. That has never happened. And to reschedule, it's happening, it's not happening. The first thing I said was, I'll believe it when I see it. And then now here we are, it's official, the reunion is not happening. And I'm furious.
And Victoria, I was kind of similar, I'll believe it when I see it. But then we started hearing about dresses being chosen. And my thought was, okay, so if they're choosing their dresses, then this is going to happen.
I mean, that's the logical thing, but for some reason, I just couldn't buy it. I don't know why. Maybe it's a cynic in me. I'm a born pessimist, okay? I just was not feeling it. I think the most heartbreaking thing of it all was when the news broke on Club Bravo. We realized it's not happening. It took a while for it to sink in. But then I saw on Ebony's page, whose book we just got done discussing, Pretty Powerful. So y'all need to tune into those episodes as well. But to see Ebony share on her Instagram, the would have been dress. I wasn't in Club Bravo on Clubhouse, but I heard, she was going for, kind of bridal meets Disney princess. I loved the dress. I thought she looked stunning. I was super excited, but I could tell she was incredibly disappointed.
Yeah.
And notably, it would have been her first reunion. I understand that other housewives have done reunions before. But it seemed like they were A-okay with it not happening. And the only person, no, not true. The only few people who were disappointed were Ebony herself and a fraction of the fandom, of the fandom.
Yes. So, so first of all, Bravo was full of shit, because one of the best reunions out of all of the reunions I have ever seen was the Atlanta reunion that they did on Zoom.
True. Listen, that was good. And I think it's worth mentioning here on the show that Bravo claimed they had crew problems, technical difficulties with the crew. They never made it about the housewives or anything else. Apparently, the crew's taking the blame here. I think it's an excuse. I agree. They're full of shit. They should have had a virtual reunion. And I agree. I mean, when Nene did this with her laptop, listen, it was over.
and when they were fighting and Andy was trying to get them to be quiet, and they wouldn't be quiet, he muted them and they kept on yelling. That was
I thought that was reality TV gold, as they would say. It was a good reunion. So for me, it was just, it's excuses. I don't care about, not having a venue, not having enough crew. Send the women, computers, cameras, lighting, whatever the hell you need to. Mail them what they need to have the reunion. Do it from home. Have a virtual reunion. We won't kill you, Andy. We won't kill you, Bravo. And just make it happen. But I think, and this is my truth and my opinion, they didn't want to tackle the conversation on race. They were not equipped. I already know Andy's not equipped, but I don't think the network itself was ready equipped to have the conversation. See, I would much rather them have a conversation and it be flawed, because the truth is no one's perfect. The world's not perfect. I'm not expecting us to have a utopia, right? But I would rather have a conversation that is flawed as opposed to having no conversation. And I think that's where Bravo went wrong. And I think it's just foul, them not having a reunion.
And I look at it this way. I look at it as, if you're not going to have a conversation about racism, that means that you're signing off on racism and that you're condoning racism. That's how I'll say it. I'll say it. I don't want to have a career in reality television anyway. So
same.
You know, I'm an actor and I want to do acting roles. And part of the acting role is not being a heightened version of myself on a Bravo show. So I'll say it. They're signing off on racism. They're condoning racism. And so, they're sweeping it under the rug because they're thinking that it's going to go away. Not to mention, there's a good chunk of fans who are real big fucking racists. And I'll say that too.
They are. They are. And I feel, because again, you know, I can acknowledge that I might be in a bubble myself, but when I step outside the bubble, I'm realizing folks are happy the reunion's not happening. They're saying it was a shit season. We don't need to rehash anything. You know, the last episode was great. It was, you know, everything was tied up in a bow. They were all friends and, you know, shaking their tits with pasties on and group hug everyone. And right. I'm just like, okay.
So on Clubhouse, I remember saying, when we were discussing this months and months ago, my thought was, I bet that they're trying to create this narrative and they're trying to tell a story. And so I go, I bet you the very last episode, it's going to be like, kumbaya, everyone's getting along. We've solved racism. It's done. And they proved me right.
100%. I actually remember you saying that.
And so I think in their eyes, that group hug meant, okay, there's a group hug. We never need to talk about this again.
True. I guess the $1 million, I agree. I think for me, the $1 million question is, where does New York go from here? Like, where do they go from here? I mean, is it going to be an Orange County situation where they're going to go on an indefinite hiatus and then return whenever? Are they going to bring Miss Dorinda back, who we're here to discuss? You know, is Ebony going to be there? I mean, I think that's my big question, you know, and even putting casting assumptions aside, I mean, where does the franchise, where does New York go from here?
Well, in my eyes, after this, the Real Housewives of New York is tainted. It's tainted. And I didn't know if I could ever enjoy it again.
I mean, you know, it's a beloved franchise. I'm just trying to think, what are these execs thinking? What, you know, what's production thinking? I just, where do you go from here?
Well, if it's beloved, I guess I've fallen out of love and I'm getting a divorce.
We're getting a divorce.
Now, if Ebony comes back, if they give Ebony another shot.
Yeah.
Okay. you know.
See, I'm a firm believer every new housewife deserves at least 2 seasons. You need that first season, and then you see yourself. And then you need that second season where I'm not saying you're a pro, but at least you have an idea of the unknown.
Right.
Unfortunately, Dr. Tiffany Moon was not given that opportunity. I mean, Dallas is on pause.
Forever.
You know, Ebony now, no reunion, and we're speculating, where do we go from here? You know, I just, I don't know.
And luckily, you know, yes, this is a podcast that centers a lot on Bravo, but luckily we're talking about books, so I don't have to watch the shows that I don't want to watch. You know, it's not like our friends over at Crappens where, you know, they talk about the show. So no matter what, whether they're liking a season or not, they've got to watch it and get through the season because, you know, that's what they talk about. But for me, luckily, we talk about books here. So if, you know, I don't feel like watching your seain, I don't have to.
I agree. I mean, I've been checking out of some Bravo shows because I can't. Unfortunately, I've been checked out. I've been checked out of Below Deck for some time. Salt Lake City is in for 2 seasons, and I'm gonna be real. The conversations already are getting so heated, so wild. I'm just like, I'm probably going to have to check out. It's just too much. And what else do we have going on? Oh, Potomac. Potomac's happening. You know, that's getting a bit wild. Not the show, just the conversations around it. Yeah, and I'm just like, oh, God, I can't. Just someone write a book so I can read it and I can move on with my life.
Giselle, actually, I actually would be interested in reading a Mia book.
I would read, these are my top 3 on Potomac, whose books I'd love to read, with the current cast, of course. I want to read a Mia book. I want to read a Karen book. And I want to read a Giselle book. Yes. Those are the 3 women, top 3 books I want to read from Potomac. Candace isn't ready for a book. No. Neither is Ashley. Who else do we have there? Robin, not yet. No. I mean, Robin has a story to tell, just not yet. And I think that's it for the cast. So Giselle, Karen, and Mia. I think Mia has a story to tell right now.
Because with Robin, I think Robin has some issues that she needs to get to the other side of. And once she gets to the other side, then I would love to read a book from her.
Yes.
Candace needs to focus on getting real management and a record deal first. and getting someone who oversees her video shoots that makes sure that the props show up, like the cars from the last one. And that, you know, they have basics on a set like craft services and makeup. Just saying. Then I'd read her book.
Candace needs to work. I'm going to be real. Her songs are bop, okay? Her music video, I get it. You had a low budget. That's more of a YouTube video. I still bought your music. I still think it's a bop. However, you need to hire a manager. Your husband cannot be a manager. And I know folks are going to spin it and make it seem like Mia was coming from a place of being, you know, super shady and whatever, but Mia's speaking from real experience, okay? And as someone who has had to work with a spouse who I'm not paying, and he's not paying me, because we've done it both ways, it can get contentious, you know? So when Mia was trying to say, you know, it rolls over into your home life, let your husband, she said it on Watch What Happens Live, let your husband be your husband, hire a manager. I think it's true. Right. Because as it is, and I know I'm assuming, but based off what I'm seeing on TV, Candace and Chris need to get their shit together. They need to be okay with each other. They don't need the friction that comes with having to work together. No.
And plus, and I said this on Clubhouse, part of having a manager, because I have one, but is they're supposed to network and help you find more work and create more opportunities for you as an artist. And a manager, because yesterday in Clubhouse, and it was like driving me up the fucking wall to the point that I had to say something. Because they were going off and, well, you know, she's not paying him as a manager. She's not paying him as a manager. People, this is Entertainment 101. Your agent and your manager does not get paid unless you get paid. And they get a percentage off of what you make. So all of you people who think that as a manager or a husband or whatever, that Candace is supposed to be paying him up front, no, it does not work that way.
No.
He gets paid when she gets paid, and he gets a percentage of what she gets. And so his job as manager is supposed to be networking and creating other opportunities for her and getting her signed on a record label. But from what I gather, and this is no diss on him at all.
No.
He just doesn't have music industry connections, which
He
is why she's
doesn't.
not signed. Because if he did, she'd be signed. And have
My
a music
thing
with a budget.
I agree. And my thing with Candace is, you know, and this is my thoughts anyway, spend the money on finding the right people and having them help propel you.
Right.
Because I've said it a million times about books and authors. It's the same thing. If you want to get traditionally published, you need an agent. So you need to spend the time to find an agent who believes in you and your story. And then now with their connections, they're going to get you through the door of a major publishing house. And if they're real good, they're going to help you negotiate the best deal possible on your behalf.
Right.
And yes, they get their cut. Yes, you pay them, but that's the reason you do it. It's just like hiring a publicist, which is separate and apart because publicists charge separately and different. But however, their job is to help you get into the major publications, to get you in front of the right people that will help you get the best break. No diss to Chris, but if you don't have those connections, you're not going to be an effective manager.
Right.
I don't think Chris was a manager. I've been describing him as a personal assistant.
Exactly. And there's no shame in that.
There's no shame. What he's been doing is making the phone calls, making the appointments, scheduling this, booking that, making sure the makeup shows up, making sure this, but that to me is more personal assistant, not a music industry manager,
right.
Not a publicist trying to get you press, not an agent who's trying to get you through the door of record labels. If you want to write a book, a publisher, none of that. That for me, Chris is an assistant. No shade to Chris, but it's just you don't have that expertise. So that's
right.
all you're really saving her is having to pay for her own assistant.
And, you know, this whole mom and, you know, husbander came from momager, which was Kris Jenner from the Kardashians. The difference is Kris Jenner had entertainment industry connections.
Yes. It's all about the connections. That's what you're paying for. People miss the point. Again, right. When you hire a publicist, it's because you looked at her previous work. You're like, wait, she got this person in this magazine on this morning show. You are paying for their connections, period, full stop. If you want to get in a music, you know, you want to get a music deal, you want to get a book deal, you're paying for the connections they know within these places that will get you through the door. Otherwise, you wouldn't even be at the front porch. So I think there's a misconception because folks are not in these creative spaces, so they right. don't really understand the names, the terms, the jobs, the nuances, and they're just spewing informed opinions, put it that way.
Right. Bullshit. They're spewing bullshit. I'll just say it. I like how we're flip sides of the coin, like Victoria, you're, you know, the diplomatic one.
I know, right? We work less, we work.
Well, let's talk about this book, yes. Which I am so far thoroughly enjoying. And it's funny because you're reading it, I'm listening to it on Audible.
So I just want to say, y'all, from the front cover to when I actually removed the dust jacket for the book, which I love the photo at the back, I love the photo on the front. It's a well-made book. Okay, It's very nice. And I'm one of those people. I am superficial, even though I care about what's inside. But anywho, Dorinda's book, Make It Nice, is divided into 9 chapters. We also have an introduction. And of course, you close out with your acknowledgements. But I want to start with the introduction, Les, because I love a good first line. You know, I even remember in Jeopardy, there was a category, you know, name the book. They'd give you the first line of the novel, classics, of course, and you'd remember it. And Dorinda, in her introduction, granted, it's not the first chapter, but still, it was really good. She says, if I could go back in time and give some advice to the young girl from Great Barrington, Massachusetts, who climbed trees so that she could carve out a place of her own and think, away from her 2 brothers and sisters and the surveillance of her mother, I would tell her to stop worrying about the destination and trust the journey. That is legit the first sentence in her introduction. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm in for a ride.
Right.
You know, she goes on to say, you know, the basic stuff that we learn as we age, to not be afraid of falling short or taking a misstep, to embrace life as it happens. And she also says, I would tell her that a person is shaped as much by their failures as they are by their successes. And I'm like, okay, this woman isn't sugarcoating shit. She's going to give us the good. She's going to give us the bad. She's going to give us the ugly. And she delivered. I loved hearing in her intro that she lived in many places. I mean, I knew this, but just to kind of read it. She grew up in Great Barrington. She lived in New York. She lived in Hong Kong, Australia, Paris, Vienna, Germany, London. During that time, she's worked at many places, from creating businesses. I mean, she was an aerobics instructor. She worked at Liz Claiborne. Her first job was at an advertising firm, I remember reading. And, you know, she had a full life. So even prior to coming on Housewives, this woman lived to some degree. She had some real experiences, and she admits that, you know, in her personal life, even though her first husband and her, you know, they didn't make it together, they had a daughter who she's very proud of. And they had what they call a blended family, because even though her husband remarried and she remarried, they had great relationships. And she said it was a great step, or it was a great testament, rather, that when her second husband was dying, her first husband was actually there at his bedside. So for me, that speaks to the deep relationships that she has. The fact that they were step parents to each other's other children. They never referred to them as stepchildren. They were just their kids. Right. My son, my daughter. I mean, for me, that says a lot. And to also hear that her mum was such a great influence in her. And she tells us from the get-go, we're going to get a whole bunch of famous words, sayings, and stuff from her mum that speaks to the great relationship they had. And I also find this interesting because we judge these housewives, we pay attention to every small detail. So to hear Dorinda say, for the majority of her life, she was fearful of falling short. She didn't want to show her imperfections. You know, she was afraid of being the bad mom, the bad wife. You know, she believed perfection was the definition of success. So to then now see this person on Housewives who is a train wreck at times.
Right.
You're like, wait, hold on. But she said before deciding to join Housewives, she fit this mold. And she realized, and she said it's funny, she became a housewife after her husband passed. But she realized she was just playing all these different roles. She was first a daughter. She was Dorinda Sincala. Then she became Dorinda Lynch, the wife of Ralph Lynch, the mother of Hannah Lynch. And then she became Mrs. Medley, the wife of Dr. Richard Medley. But she was trying to figure out who the hell is just Dorinda, away from everything else. And she says, you know, if you see her on Housewives, you know, she doesn't like facades. She doesn't like fake. She just goes out there. And she says it's because she finally felt empowered to just be herself and not fit these molds. And she gives a good example that when her husband died, and that's Medley, Richard Medley, she was invited to this lunch. She said it was for the Council of Foreign Relations. And she said when she got the invite, she was like, of course, I'm going to go, she's a widow and, you know, and that's what she should be doing.
Right.
And she shows up and she said, she was miserable, just sitting there, being there, you know, just having to keep up the appearances. And she was just like, it was a great event, you know, it was beautiful. But she realized I wasn't happy. And it was right at that time she signed up for Housewives. She's trying to settle into her new self, you know, who she is apart from these titles and connections and everything. And I think, based on her intro, that we were seeing a woman who was for the first time stepping outside of a mold that she's lived her entire life. And the ups, the downs, the train wreck and everything. We were just finally seeing who she was as an individual. And for me, that was interesting. So she's not Dorinda, the woman we see on TV. This is just Dorinda, not married, you know, not mothering, not being a daughter, not thinking about anything, just being. And I'm like, what a place for you to go discover yourself.
Right.
Housewives.
Right.
That was wild. I mean, that's the last place I would go to figure life out.
You know?
Anyway, so that was her intro. And her first chapter was entitled On Pause. And apparently that's what she was told by the network, that we're not firing you. This isn't the end. We're just going on a pause. I mean, Les, what do you think about the word pause?
Like, it's like we're going on a break. Like, we're going to just take a little break.
But what do you mean? That was Dorinda. She was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
I find it so funny. But this was interesting. She says, so again, the chapter's on pause. And she said in August 2020, she was getting ready for the next season because Housewives have, you know, that this was her life for the past 6 years. She said for 4 months. So this is what I find interesting. And this is like some insight for folks who don't really know the details of Bravo. So I'm reading now. She says, my life in those 6 years on Housewives had taken on a new rhythm. For 4 months, we filmed the show. I ate, I drank, and lived the Housewives 24 hours a day. And then for the rest of the year, I was making plans for the upcoming season. She describes Housewives, Dorinda says, participating in the show was a bit like the Olympics or opening night at the opera. You have to prepare yourself mentally for months before filming. You watch reruns, you think about what you want to say, you strategize, you arrange parties, you brainstorm places that would be fun to go as a group. And then before you know it, it's showtime again. I mean, this woman took this job seriously, clearly. I mean, the fact that she's planning and strategizing, you know, she even goes on to say, you know, for folks, you might think the show's scripted, but it really isn't. She says, you have one shot to get it right. And she says, for all your planning, all the strategy she's talking about that you do, it usually goes all down the drain in one go. And I found that very interesting because she was even saying that when she said, not well, bitch, you know, that phrase people keep saying with Dorinda, it wasn't planned. It just happened. And she said, sometimes you say things you never intended to say or ever meant when you said it. You know, you're being reactionary in the moment. But she says you have to go along with it or else you'll be eaten alive. Housewives are like sharks. They can smell blood in the water, so you better be sure not to bleed. I was like, damn, Dorinda.
It makes sense to me.
I know. I mean, she goes on. She's like, you know, for a brief period, you think you're in a parallel universe. The camera crew, the production staff, and castmates, it becomes your whole world. It's like you're insulated. And in a weird way, you know, that kind of makes sense to me. That they are in their own bubble. But I appreciated that she also applauded the one thing all housewives have in common, which is bravery. Because you have to be some type of brave to go put your whole life on TV for millions of people to scrutinize.
Right.
But then Dorinda gets to the point, you know, that I cared about the most, which was her being cancelled or being put on pause, I should say. So like she said, going back to 2020, she was gearing up to film season 13. But she had everything that happened in season 12 on her mind. And she said, watching it, like rewatching that season, it was a lot. It was a lot even for her to watch. And she said to some degree she expected it because she had a real rough year. She had a lot going on. She broke her rib. Her father got sick. We all know her house flooded. And all her, possessions and everything were just floating in her basement. And she said, when she was watching the dump trucks taking away all the stuff out her basement,
right,
she felt like she was transported 10 years back.
Right.
Because she was saying that was the last time her and her husband, who had passed, had renovated the home.
Right.
So for her, it was more than just losing the pictures, losing the memorabilia, just losing everything. For her, it was, this is what we decorated, this is what we made, and now it's all washed away.
Right.
So everything was falling apart, and now she had to redo the home that they did together, but this time she had to do it alone.
Right.
And she was really falling apart, even with her mom and, folks saying to her, you can't be this way. You're getting ready to go film. But she tried to pull it together, redid her home, start over. But also her long-term relationship, that ended.
Right.
Her then boyfriend, John, that whole thing. Because she realized that relationship wasn't going anywhere. So when she went into season 12, it's fair to say she was a train wreck. Bravo never gave us that context, though.
I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting.
No, I was going to say Bravo never gave us that context. And for me, that was sad.
What I found was interesting is when she broke down, she was married to her first husband for 6 years. She was married to her second husband who passed away for 6 years. And she was with John for 6 years. So they were all like same amount of time.
I remember her mentioning something about sixes somewhere. I think she mentioned something about that number. I don't know if I have a tab there, but I just remember, her mentioning something about that, noticing those numbers in her life. But she said to her friend, right, season 12 wasn't her best season, but the next one's going to be better, right?
Uh-huh.
And then she gets a call from production saying, hi, Dorinda, we're going to take a pause. We want you to take a year off and really enjoy your time, and we'll revisit this next year. She was shocked. She was like, what? I don't want to take a pause. But she said they insisted, no, we're going to take a pause. She couldn't believe it. And she said she goes down the measures of success of a housewife. So she said, wasn't I a beloved character? Weren't my ratings high? Didn't I have a ton of Instagram followers? She says, to a normal person, all this might sound very unimportant. But in the land of reality TV, these are the measures of success. In this land, numbers count, social engagement counts, fans count. So she didn't understand what was going on, because in her mind, I'm great. People love me. Why am I going on pause? But they told her it was final. Andy called her. He said a lot of nice things, apparently, but he used the same words. We're not saying goodbye. This isn't goodbye forever. It's just a pause.
Uh-huh.
But Dorinda's like, I don't understand this word pause. What does this mean? And she said she went ballistic. As she said, she doesn't like sugarcoating anything. Just tell her what the F is going on. But she wasn't getting any answers. And then she realized, well, she just has to suck it up and just accept it. Because she called Andy out saying, are you guys saying I'm fired, but you're just not saying I'm fired?
Right.
She went down the rabbit hole. But then she just realized, you know what? Thanks for the opportunity. It's time to move on.
Right.
For me, reading that, I was just like, I hope that wasn't me. It felt bad. And then she starts going down, maybe if I had pretended, maybe if I wasn't so inflammatory, just going down that shoulda, woulda, coulda. And she references that maybe if she was just a woman who was okay to just go with the flow, life would have been easier. I mean, do you think it would have made a difference for her though?
No. The thing is, though, that last season, and that was before, we knew about the house flooding and all of that stuff. The fact that we were uninformed, it just made her look like a dark person.
That's what I mean. I felt production didn't give us a full view of her. Yeah. Because apparently, when she had broken her rib, when her dad was sick, when she broke up with the boyfriend, all that happened before the flood. The flood was like the major.
That was just like the icing on the cake. Basically.
Correct. And she pulled herself together for the show and doing the appearance, just doing everything she needed to do.
Right.
What I didn't appreciate is Bravo not giving us the full picture, because I've heard many times, Les, that they'll film a bunch of stuff, but then production decides what they air. So your mother could have died, God forbid, knock on wood, but it's like, if they don't think it's relevant and then now you're grieving and you're being a bitch and you're just going out, if they don't feel like giving context to you, they just see you as a raging person against your cast member.
Right.
So I would have wished, that's all I'm going to say, is that they would have given Dorinda a rounded closure. See, we complain about what they do and what they don't do for like Ebony and other cast members of color. However, I feel Dorinda needed a season, especially after that one, to kind of just leave her hanging like that.
Same.
The fact she put on a good face, she redid her home and she's pushing through and she was doing all this. They should have given her an opportunity for us to see her as a full woman that, I know I was a bitch. I know I was raging. I know this was crazy. I was drinking.
This is why.
But this is what I've been going through, and give her that opportunity to reflect and say and speak, go on her apology tour
right,
and explain at the same time, this is what I've been going through. So I was happy that by the end of that chapter, she said the shock of going on pause wore off. She realized she wasn't a failure, that indeed this might be a bit, this might be having some freedom, because when she really thought about it, she never had a pause on her life, because right when her husband had passed, she just got the opportunity for Housewives.
Right.
So it's like, yeah. So it's like Dorinda's just been on this freight train, just going, because y'all know it takes forever to stop a train. And she was just going. So the fact that she was able to realize, okay, I'm not a failure. I've never had a pause in my life ever. Maybe, just maybe, this is a good thing. I was happy that, it kind of came around that way. And then also, like she said, we're in a strange moment in history when most of the world went on pause.
Right.
Because of the pandemic. So,
and that's what I actually called, that's me personally. I called it the big pause. That's what I called it. Like the world.
I agree. But in the end, the end of this chapter anyway, she said she doesn't know what's going to happen. She has no idea what the future holds. Neither of us do. But at the end, she still wants to be that Dorinda Sincala from Great Barrington, Massachusetts. So that was very interesting.
Right.
And that was the end of chapter 1. Chapter 2, in summary, though, was entitled Home. And that, for me, Les, was my favorite chapter so far. Again, haven't finished yet. I'll give my verdict at the end. But for right now, of the first 3 chapters, Home was my favorite one. This is where we get to know Dorinda. We get to know the girl Dorinda growing up. I mean, she said she was born in 1964 to an Italian mother and Polish father. And I loved how she says, her parents met at 18.
Uh-huh.
Her dad saw her mom walking down the street saying, oh, she's such a beautiful woman. I want to, get with her. And within 8 years, they had 4 children. There was Johnny, Dean, Dorinda, and Melinda. And they're all 2 years apart. And again, born in 64, let's stick a pin there. And I loved how she said, growing up, we weren't raised as individuals in the way kids are today. You know, like everyone's catered to. Oh, this one's quiet. This one's outgoing. I mean, I didn't grow up in a big family like Dorinda. It's just my sister and I. It's just us two. But we weren't raised as individuals.
Right.
We're just all lumped in one, especially even when cousins were over or staying with us and stuff. So, you know, I could relate to that. And basically she's saying we didn't have options like the kids do today. Her mom was the captain of the ship, as she would say. So her mom ran the household. It was very traditional. Her dad worked, came home with a paycheck, and all these things. And she said, we never challenged our parents. So I found it very funny. She said they'd go to a restaurant, all of them, and they all got the same thing all the
Veal
time.
piccata, right?
No, wait. The first one she said was veal cutlet Parmesan special. That was the first thing. But there was another meal she referenced later. And she was saying that her siblings would never be defiant to their mom. And she gave us an example. I don't know if you caught this, Les, when she said she saw a child pull down his pants and showed his bum to everyone in Starbucks.
Yes.
And she said that wasn't horrifying that the child did that. She was like, no, that's normal. But when the mom stooped down and said, no, use your words, she about died. Because my mother would not be telling me that, I tell you. So, it was very interesting to hear about her brother. She said there was Johnny, who was her eldest brother. She talked about how her mom was paranoid about them being kidnapped and when they would go out. But I think she said she was closest to her second brother, Dean. They were very close. And even though he was very mischievous, you know, he'd always look out for her. He was very thoughtful. But Melinda, who is the baby, they're polar opposites as sisters, but apparently they were very close. And she said, you know, even though they were both girls and even though they shared a room together, like that wasn't enough. But she felt growing up, Melinda always saw her and understood her the way her other siblings and her parents didn't. You know, she had the traditional upbringing. They went to school, they went to church. It was just very, very nice kind of getting that insight. And how she said, you know, they never had a lot of money, but they were comfortable. Like they were just okay. They were happy-go-lucky kids. They had their grandparents down the road. That was nice. But what I also loved was that the fact her parents never pushed the kids to be anything specific. They never said, like, you had to be doctors, you had to be lawyers. They just wanted you to be. Right. But I will never forget when Dorinda said it took her a long time to realize how frugal her mother was. Because like she said, growing up, she felt like they were okay. They weren't rich, but they were okay. But do you remember that example with the orange
juice? Yeah. The orange juice.
You guys, Dorinda said she went to college, right? And she went to get some orange juice because it was at the buffet. And she said the first time she poured herself a cup and she drank it, she spat it out because it just tasted like sugar. But she never realized that her mom bought the concentrated juice and then diluted it with water. So for me, that was just, very, very endearing, just very unknowing. It was also nice that her dad, again, she was born in 64, you guys, but her dad was somewhat progressive. He never had stuff for the girls to do, stuff for the boys to do. She went fishing with the boys. She would, have to string up her own bait. She wasn't freaked out by worms or anything. And so that was very heartwarming to kind of get that background. But also her family was super religious. So her mom, they were Catholic, and they were Catholic, wasn't it? Yeah, they were Catholic, and they went to church a lot. And it was also interesting when Dorinda is now contrasting when she had a daughter, and realizing how her mom must have had it real hard, because when Dorinda had her daughter, she was living in London, she said, and she had a baby nurse, she had a housekeeper, and she felt stressed the fuck out.
Right.
So her mom being married at 19, having 4 children, very little money to work with in comparison to Dorinda. You know, she was just saying, man, you know, she appreciates, I guess, her upbringing. But it was also interesting to hear how her mom has evolved, because she held on to religion tightly. And then to read now that her mom is questioning some of the stories from the Bible. So, you know, I kind of like that. I also liked hearing about her paternal grandparents who were Polish.
Yes.
Who still lived in the city in New York. And the story about her dad and how much of an intellect he was, but having to give up school to go help with the father and his farm. So, I mean, I just loved reading about Dorinda's upbringing. I think it was, you know, very interesting, you know, hearing about her Polish grandparents, her Italian grandparents, both immigrant families, one side being more Americanized, one side, you know, not even speaking English.
Right.
So it was very interesting. But like she said, culturally, though, they were an immigrant family. You know, they communed around food and all these things. So for her, it was a big thing. But I think Dorinda's life changed when she went to school, when she was accepted to the Berkshire School as a day student, which was like a fancy school. And just hearing her interactions with these children who were more financially better off than her, and then realizing, well, this is a life I want to live. I want to go to New York. I love the story about her going to see the Rockettes as her first trip to New York. That was very...
the Rockettes is kind of like a gateway to a lot of people, like a lot of celebrities and a lot of people like, I first went to New York to see the Rockettes and I knew I needed to be here. So like the Rockettes are like a gateway drug.
It sounds that way. It sounds that way. But, you know, Dorinda's growing up wasn't always light. You know, there was some dark. She did suffer from an eating disorder. So reading about that, you know, was quite interesting. You know, just all the pressure she put on herself and stuff like that. And yeah, wanting to go to New York. I found it funny. Her mom was like, no, you're not going to New York. Go to Boston instead.
Right.
I was just like, okay, I guess, is Boston better? Yes.
Well, closer. I think it's Boston was closer.
True. And then hearing how she worked real hard trying to get into the college there, but ultimately going to Pennsylvania because they gave her a scholarship. But yeah, you know, it was quite interesting. Just hearing, she came from humble beginnings. She really, really did. And, you know, I remember there was this line, I think I tabbed it in my book. Yep. She said, when you're operating from a mentality of scarcity, it's tough to see the big picture, particularly when you lack a sense of what the world looks like outside your neighborhood. For many, many years, I couldn't see the big picture at all. All I could see was the next step in front of me. At 17 years old, though, I came face to face with the big picture I was meant to see, which was New York. And all she wants was to go to New York and do everything to get there. But again, I still found it hilarious. Her mom wanted her to go to Boston, but and she didn't know how she was going to get back to New York City after the Rockettes, but you know, she's going to make it happen. And I think that was my favorite part. That's something you don't get with all these Housewives Bravo books, which was just like real Erica. Which is like this real in-depth story about her upbringing. Like, I felt like, okay, this is a girl, you know, I would probably know in my small town and wanting to leave. So yeah, it was just so funny reading about that. And again, she was just your average everyday girl. So that was my favorite chapter. Did you love it?
Yeah, and I was kind of like, I get her. Like, I get her.
I get her. I also appreciate how much of, how driven she was. It's like she saw her big picture. She didn't know how to get there at the time. She was really young. She's a teenager. She's going step by step by step. But it segues into the third chapter, which is entitled The Bigger Picture. So again, this is where I pause and I'll say, the structure of this book flows. Remember, she ended by saying she couldn't see the big picture, especially as someone who's operating from a position of scarcity. She had very little.
Right.
She didn't have a, safety net. She never had any of that, financially anyway. But now the next chapter is big picture. So when I tell y'all this book flows, it flows just from reading books all day long. It flows. So chapter 3 is entitled The Big Picture. And her first lines, I swear, Dorinda has some good first lines. Her first line in this chapter is, as we all know, life doesn't always give us what we want, but we have to take what we're given and make it work to our advantage.
And that was the one line that stuck out to me big time.
I'm telling you, this woman, listen, she has it. And I realized I jumped ahead because this is where she said she applied to college. She excelled well at her school. But for her classmates, rather, money wasn't a factor in choosing college. But for her, it was a huge factor. It's all about who's given me the biggest scholarship, who's covering these biggest things. And she said, she applied to Franklin and Marshall because her brother Johnny had gone there on a scholarship, and she applied to Boston College, which is where she really wanted to go. Everyone at the Berkshire School wanted to go to Boston College in those days. It was very prestigious and it was very appealing to me because it was only 2 hours away from home, whereas Franklin and Marshall was a whopping 5 hours away in Pennsylvania. She said Boston College rejected her. And I'm going to just tell you this right now. Dorinda gave me life with the way she handles her rejections. And she gives us numerous examples of how she handles rejections or not being given opportunities. So I'm pairing this with my Pretty Powerful, and I'm upgrading my life. So this is what's going on. The school rejected her and she was discouraged, but she never sat back and took the rejection. What she did instead was get her mom to drive her down to the school. She made a fortune cookie with a fortune inside that says DC belongs at BC. So it's Dorinda Sincala belongs at Boston College. I died. Anyway, she left the fortune cookie with the president. Shortly after that, she was put on the wait list. So listen, homegirl went from a straight out rejection to being waitlisted. And I'm sorry, that's a win.
Total win.
That's a win. And she thought she really had a good chance. However, she wouldn't be able to find out because while she was waiting, the school in Pennsylvania, Franklin and Marshall, accepted her and offered her a scholarship. So her dad was like, okay, case closed. That's where you're going. They're paying. I'm sorry. So anyway, she was upset and she had to go. And she said she was very homesick. When they dropped her off, they're like, oh, we'll see you at Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is end of November. They're dropping this girl off late August. So September, October, November, it would have been 3 months before she would have been able to go back home. And she was devastated. And she was sad. She's going through the normal college person stuff. And I'm not going to tell you it all. You need to go read it. But it's very good. It's very good. But she says if she didn't go to Boston College, she realizes now it was a blessing. Because if she never went, she would have never met June, who turned out to be a very good friend, who is still her lifelong friend. She wouldn't have met her. And because she would have gone home every weekend, And, you know, just her life and her experiences wouldn't have happened that way because she would have gone home because it's easy. So sometimes for her, she's saying she realized going to that school turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to her. Dorinda also tells us about her first love, Billy, which I'm not going to talk about that, but I'm just going to tell y'all. It's good, it's bad, but it's very real. Okay? Les, what did you think about Dorinda talking about Billy? What did you think about that relationship?
Let's just say that Billy was a player.
Player.
Billy was a player. Because the part where she was like, well, there was me, but then whoever else. And I think she worded it like that, and whoever else.
I'm going to be real. When I was reading that, I felt Dorinda. You know, you meet that person, you think you're going to be with them, and then shit doesn't work out. The truth is they're toxic, or they're not good for you, or you just know it's not going anywhere. Many different variations of Billies out there.
Right.
But it's like gravity. You just keep getting pulled back there, and you know damn well. Huh?
Because it was exciting.
I know. I mean, that's the only thing I can think of. But anyways, y'all need to read that story about Billy. I'm not going to tell y'all, but here's the funny thing. After she graduated, she realized I wasn't meant to study law. I love fashion. And she ended up, because she wanted to go to the city. So she ended up saying, you know what, I'm going to start a career in fashion. And the first thing she did was sign up for the Macy's buying program. I mean, I found that very, again, just relatable. She's just like your everyday girl.
Right.
So I liked hearing that she signed up for that. She was working there. She signed up with a temp agency. She got other jobs. She carpooled with people who lived in her neighborhood to get into the city.
She arranged the carpool.
I know. She's like, I found out they take the cab, but we can't afford cabs. So we all pack into the cab.
Right. Because none of them had enough money to actually take a cab. So she like organized it so that she and all of her friends would catch a cab. And it was almost like a bus, the cab.
I know. It was really a bus. I like that. It was really a bus. But yeah, just hearing the normal story, moving to New York, shitty apartment, roommates, carpooling, just everything was great. She was doing, like I said, the first thing she signed up for was the Macy's buying program. She got other jobs along the way, not going to spoil it. But the one thing, and this is why I say Dorinda is giving me life, because she knows how to handle a rejection. And I'm only going to tell you this story because I think it's super important, you guys, is when she saw a job offer at Liz Claiborne. And back in those days, and I know this to be true, when you would interview and they'd put an ad in the paper, right? Especially your first couple of jobs. And they were still doing this in the 90s and late 80s, 90s. So I know folks out there know what I'm talking about. You would show up and you'd be in a lobby and there's a bunch of people there all interviewing and you're just being called in one after the other, after the other. I mean, this could be a basic job as a receptionist. That's what they did. So Dorinda's there sitting, waiting, right? She made an effort in her appearance and ready for this interview. And someone comes out and say, well, interviews are over. We're done. And Dorinda's like, wait. I didn't get interviewed yet. I want this job. And I'm just going to say, and I'm not going to say the outcome to not spoil it, but Dorinda kept showing up, okay, to try and get an interview. This is the perseverance this woman has. And I'm going to be real, Les. I respect it.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
I respect it. I also respect that when she got her first bonus, she made a huge mistake. But what I loved about it was when she called her parents, told them what happened, and she moved back home. I'm not going to spoil it for y'all. But when she told them what happened, her parents were very non-judgmental. And that's very rare, especially for parents of a certain generation.
Yeah, like ours.
Les, if it was my mother I'm gonna be real. I think my dad would be a bit more lenient, but my mom, I want to hear about it till I wouldn't. You know what? I would hear about it to this day.
I'd still be hearing about it. Remember? Yeah.
It could have happened to me in my 20s. I'm in my 40s. I'm still gonna hear that shit. It is wild. So for me, it was nice because she said, when I went back, they didn't judge me. To them, I hadn't failed. It was just part of the process. I'd fallen off the horse and now I was going to figure out how to get on the horse again. I'm like, Dorinda, give me your parents. I want your parents.
Seriously.
Anyway, that was a learning experience. And I liked that she said it helped her to learn, to grow. And it helped her to also become the successful woman she would become and would continue to be. And she said at 25, she knew if she kept working and putting herself, in a certain position, she would grow. This woman started saving, being frugal, and she was very intentional about meeting a partner. And that's where she leaves us at the end of chapter 3. She said, she was determined to put herself together, both financially, in her career, and especially when it came to dating. She said, I was determined not to waste time dating people that were wrong for me. I knew the kind of man I wanted, and I wasn't going to settle for anything less. She wanted a responsible, loving partner who valued family, religion, and finances like I did. At 25, I was done dating for the sake of dating. I wanted to find a husband. And she said, I hear so many women complaining about their partners, but they have chosen those partners. If you know you want a steak, you have to order a steak. You cannot order a hamburger and then be upset when it turns out to not be steak, people.
Boom.
Boom. So all I'm going to say is Dorinda was dropping some gems here. And she said, if you're still single, and you're waiting for your ideal partner to enter your life, that's good. She says, keep waiting. Don't settle for less. She said she waited a real long time until she met her first husband, which was Ralph Lynch. I'm not going to tell you where she met him. It's in the book. Go buy it. But I loved reading the don't order a hamburger if you want a steak situation. And she ends the chapter by saying, she knew from the beginning Ralph would make a good father, but she wouldn't tell him for a while. And, that's how they got together. And she ends it saying, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. And y'all, those were just the first 3 chapters. Okay.
Yeah, this is going to be a good read. I really like her. And she was one of the people I never disliked her on the show, but now I really like her.
See, that's the thing. I feel even the harshest Dorinda critic, when reading this book, they can say, I know her. I can relate to her. She isn't far out, okay? I think, again, the book flows beautifully. It's very well written. It's organized well. And I think we're really in for a good book here. So whether you're a Dorinda fan, whether you're on the fence, whether you hated how season 12 went down, I still think you should give this book a go. You will definitely see her in a new light. I think so. Because I have. Definitely. I am too. I have, for sure. I am too. Well, Victoria, this was good. So I now and you said something to me that when I read it, I felt the same because you were like, I had to force myself to stop reading. I did. After chapter 3, because just to keep it fresh for the podcast. And I was the same. I wanted to listeners, we are torturing ourselves here. Not really. But I had to stop. I had to force myself to read something else because I just wanted to keep turning. I want to give you all my real life reactions to things, and I wanted to keep turning the pages, and I think you will too. You don't have to be an avid reader. I promise you. This one's super, super easy. And Dorinda, man, she's super relatable. We see the end product, but she's really, relatable. We're seeing the 57-year-old. She's
Right.
57, right? Yeah. We're seeing
Yeah.
Yeah, 64. Yeah. We're seeing the 57-year-old. However, she really is your girl next door. She really is.
Yeah, and I can't wait to read more.
Same.
So listen, everybody, we now have an Instagram handle. Oh, that's right, Victoria, I forgot to tell you. It's only been around a couple of days. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, you can follow us at The Reality Reading Rainbow. Also, we are always open to book suggestions. And I've said it before, and I will continue to say this. Some of my favorite books that I read on the podcast came from listener suggestions. My favorite book of all time on this podcast, House of Hilton, was a listener suggestion. So if you suggest books, we will read them, because a lot of times your suggestions actually broaden my scope. And if you want to make a suggestion, you can either go to our Facebook page, which is The Reality Reading Rainbow on Facebook, join the group, or you can send us an email at therealityreadingrainbow@gmail.com. Victoria, do you have anything that you want to promote?
Yes, you guys. And this is probably news for less too. I launched a podcast, you guys.
Yay!
I launched a podcast. It is called The Reader's Couch. So The Reader's Couch, it's a weekly podcast. That's what I'm doing now. And I'm bringing you some lively conversations with some awesome authors. I plan to bring some bookish personalities as well, and just people in the book world. But for right now, I'm interviewing authors. I'm having a blast.
Yay!
My first 3 episodes are live. I have a historical fiction author, I have a romance author, and I have a real good literary fiction book. That's episode 3, Emily Itami. It's so good. And I actually have an interview lined up with the book I think everyone should read. It's coming at the end of the month. The book, however, I'll tell you right now, it's Assembly by Natasha Brown.
Yay.
She's a Black British author, but I'm telling you, it's a short novel. It's 100 pages.
Oh,
but
good.
it is fire. It is fire. And if you've been loving the conversations with Les and I think you'll really appreciate this book. It's not Housewives, but it's hella good. So I'd appreciate it if you guys subscribed to The Reader's Couch.
Yes.
I'm on all major platforms. I'm also on social media at The Couch is Booked. So you can find me on Instagram at The Couch is Booked as well. And I'm super excited about the Bookish podcast.
Yay! And we've got to promote it every week here. And while you're checking out other podcasts, I actually have a few other podcasts as well. If you are a fan of movies on Hallmark and Lifetime, you can check out my podcast, A Lifetime of Hallmark, where my 2 co-hosts and I talk about movies on Lifetime and the Hallmark channel. We switch off, so 1 week is Lifetime and 1 week is Hallmark, and we try to make sense of them, and it's a fun time. And sometimes we get some of the writers of the movies and some of the actors on the movies to come on as well, so it's a lot of fun. And if you are a soap opera fan, I have a soap opera podcast called Les Loves Soaps, where I talk about your favorite soap operas in the United States and the United Kingdom. So I talk about Days of Our Lives, Young and the Restless, The Bold and Beautiful, General Hospital, EastEnders, Emmerdale, and Coronation Street. So check that out as well. And by the way, if you are a Days of Our Lives fan, Marlena gets possessed by the devil this week, and that storyline is coming back. So you better watch and tune in.
Whoop, whoop.
And that's about it. So I'm looking forward to reading these next 3 chapters, because so far Dorinda is not disappointing us at all. Wouldn't you agree?
I would agree. Dorinda is giving us life, I feel, in this book. I'm really excited, you guys. Next episode, we'll be talking about the next 3 chapters, and I can't wait.
All right. So until next time, keep reading. Bye.
Bye.